Hey everybody, welcome to episode 94 of Tuesdays with Perry. I'm going to get Perry on the line in just a second. So we're going to talk about what's on everybody's mind lately, which is Kamala Harris is a black Democrat who can't seem to get black men to vote for her. Why is that? We're going to talk about that. We're also going to talk about Wabbit season. Tim Wallace goes pheasant hunting, and apparently he doesn't know how to load a shotgun. He didn't shoot the shotgun, nor did he shoot any pheasants. He almost shot a couple rooster, though. We're going to talk about that, and we're going to talk about Donald Trump's Pennsylvania town hall, where apparently there was a couple of medical situations, and like most of his rallies, he doesn't continue with the event while people are ill. And so the liberal media went crazy, and they're calling Donald Trump crazy for dancing around and enjoying himself during the town hall. Showing joy, actually. So we're going to talk about that a little bit. So let's see if we can't get Perry on the line.
Hello?
Hey, Perry, welcome to episode 94 of Tuesdays with Perry. Thanks for joining me today. How is it in sunny Florida?
You went dead there for a second, Rudy. I think you were asking me, how is it in Florida? Is that the question?
That is the question for now, yeah.
Well, I mean, it's a tale of two cities. I consider myself very fortunate and been blessed by the man upstairs, because we here in central and north of me, north central Florida, we dodged a bullet. You know, that was the absolute girth of it. It thank God it did what everybody said it was going to do at the very last minute, which was it dropped down from a 5 all the way down to a low 3, high 2 by the time it made landfall south of Tampa. Had it hit Tampa and continued on that trajectory, you and I probably wouldn't be having a phone call tonight.
Well, I'm glad
it was that bad.
I'm glad you're safe and sound. You lost power for how many days? Was it just one day, or how many days did you lose power for?
We actually lost it for 2 days, almost to the very minute. I was surprised it took that long, because we didn't really see a lot of damage in our area. Yes, there were a lot of majestic oaks and mature pines that landed on power lines, but there wasn't nearly the amount of widespread destruction I would have expected to see, causing us to be without power for more than a day. Yeah. However, that's not to say the problems weren't further west of us, and therefore that's why we didn't have power. I don't know. Yeah. But I will tell you that we didn't get power back until Friday night, and we didn't get our phones back really until yesterday. We were still having problems yesterday, first half of the day yesterday, where calls were dropping out. I guess they were trying to re-aim towers or whatever they do. Right. And it was, I mean, that end of it was difficult because we couldn't conduct our business. But I'm just glad, for our sake. I'm praying for those who lost loved ones over on the East Coast, down around Port St. Lucie and Stewart. It was pretty bad. And I've already been told by one of the engineers we work with that we're going to be spending a lot of time down in that area of the state, probably by this time next month. So, and that's another thing. People are already complaining that, they've got problems with their roofs. And I'm talking about here in Central Florida. They're having problems with their roofs. There's interior damage because water intruded It penetrated the building's envelope through the roof. And of course, now they've got open ceilings. You have to worry about mold, this, that, the other thing. And, they call FEMA, and FEMA is like, yeah, well, we'll get to you. Well, can I at least get tarps? Because that's what FEMA does. They hand out tarps to people. No. We'll let you know when they're available. So it's already starting to shape up like what the people in Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, and Tennessee are still dealing with.
Yeah. Yeah, it seems like election interference via the storm. I want to get into the election now. So the polls, Kamala Harris's lead, if you want to call it that, has evaporated. Her momentum wasn't projected to last. They wanted to keep it lasting by keeping her out of the spotlight. It's evaporating, and now she's going on a media tour, but she's using the circular logic thing again, and it doesn't seem to be answering anybody's questions. Other things like the 60 Minutes interviews seem to be overly edited. She's supposed to go on Joe Rogan, which I don't think she'll do that unless she could limit the time, because those interviews can go for 3 hours and she could have paperwork there with her, but she'll be made to look like an idiot. But most importantly, and what's being squawked about, particularly by the Democratic media and Democratic politicos, is that she's losing the vote of black men. I have not seen, and even Don Lemon has talked to black men, and I haven't seen one clip of an endorsement of a black man that isn't involved in the media somehow or famous or whatever. She can't seem to garner any real black men vote. There was that video the campaign put out about men voting, real men voting for Kamala Harris, but it looked like a bunch of beta males having a commercial filmed at a dude ranch. So I want to talk about that, and obviously I want to hinge that onto the fact that they're disparaging Donald Trump because he doesn't want to continue with an event while people are falling ill. So let's start with poll numbers if you want, and why do you think Kamala Harris, she's usually pretty good with black men, according to Willie Brown, but they don't want to vote for her.
Well, they're not willing to wait in line to have her service them. That's the thing. And that's, again, I don't know if Willie actually said that. Let's just go on the premise he did. Look, he's a politician. What else is he going to say? The fact of the matter is, we have known since she ran for president, before she was tabbed to be the VP, since she ran for president, and why she never even stayed in the race long enough 4 years ago to actually have people vote for her. She doesn't have very good standing in the black community, contrary to what the lame brain media wants everyone to think. That's number one. Okay? One thing, anyone, I don't care what the color of your skin is, one thing people don't forget is when politicians use them, like she used black men in Oakland and San Francisco while she was DA and later as Attorney General. She loved being able to arrest black men, throw them into jail for selling pot, and run her numbers up. Look at me. Look at what I'm doing to fight crime. In the meantime, all of the rapists and murderers and thugs of other nature, where was she on those numbers? Nowhere to be found. Okay? She went after, as I've said on your show before, low-hanging fruit. It's easy to arrest a guy selling dope because he's not going to put up a fight. Why should he? So she never had street cred, contrary to what the lame brain media has continued to portray her as ever since Uncle Joe decided to bow out. We don't have to go back any further than May of this year, where pick your poison, go on YouTube and find all of these nattering nabobs from the alphabet channels talking about how she is the worst vice president in the history of the country. Okay? All of a sudden, Uncle Joe says, I'm out. She's in. And now she's got, first of all this street cred with the blacks and Hispanics. Really? She suddenly has gone from one of the most deriled vice presidents in not modern history ever in the country. I mean, you have to go all the way back to Andrew Jackson to find somebody who was hated more. Okay. And yet the media is saying how, oh, she's beating Trump in the polls. I've never believed it. And I'll tell you something, Rudy. I'm uncomfortable with what the polls are saying now, which are favorable to Trump. And the reason why I say that is because of how they conduct these polls. Now, I will say this much. Within the last 14 to 3 days prior to the election, the polls will not only get tighter, they'll become far more accurate. Only now, in the last month, are they starting to ask questions not to registered voters, but to likely voters. And soon, almost exclusively, they will be asking those questions to what are called most likely, meaning people like me and you. I vote if the only thing to vote for is, will the sun rise tomorrow? I'll be at my poll booth checking off the box. I will vote for anything that's put in front of me if it has anything to do with my welfare and the benefit of my family. And so as we get closer, those polls will become more accurate. Now, as for what they're telling us, we have a woman whose polls were inflated all the way back in July. They played with that. When they saw she wasn't getting any traction, and for all the reasons we know, number one, she wasn't really conducting herself in the way of a candidate running for any office, let alone the highest office in the land. Even to this very moment, she has yet to have done a press conference. Trump does them every week. Okay? She has avoided hard-hitting interviews until the last 10 days. She's starting to do interviews, and she's abominable. I mean, even when she's on an airhead show like The View, and a simple question, well, now that you're running for president, if you were to be elected, what is it of your administration you would do differently than the current administration? And without hesitation, she just shook her head and said, I don't think I would do anything different. Now, I admit.
Yeah, that's a layup.
Right. I admit that's actually a difficult question for her to answer, in all honesty, because the truth is she has to say, I'm going to do a lot of things different. But to say, no, looking back on the last 3.75 years, no, there really isn't anything I would want to do different. So the abomination of the withdrawal from Afghanistan, you wouldn't do different. So now we know as a commander in chief, you can't be trusted. Okay? We can't trust you on domestic policy because you're doing everything you can do. And what you will do is even more frightening with regard to the First Amendment. God forbid you become POTUS. You don't want anyone who disagrees with you, even a Kennedy, to be able to voice their opinion on any platform because it goes against your grain. You already have made it clear that you're not interested in securing the border. Let me rephrase, as a member of the Biden administration. So all of these things, not to mention ungod amounts of spending, $7 trillion a year budget. Rudy, we don't even have a fucking budget. We have continuing resolutions.
Yeah, that's
We're back to the Obama years.
But that didn't cause the inflation. That didn't cause the inflation, right? It was supply chain issues.
Yeah. So it's still supply chain issues.
Yeah.
We're still running at between 2.5% and 3.1% annual inflation.
Yeah. Which is still,
really?
It's all compounded. And the fact is that there is not one media person out there that will admit, even though economists will admit in the fine print, that unwarranted spending is the main driver of inflation.
It always is. It always is, because we're spending money we don't have.
Yeah.
And when you turn on the printing presses, you no longer have a currency, you have monopoly money. And the only people that get hurt when you do that, and it's happened in my lifetime, this is now the fourth time in my lifetime where ridiculous inflation has devastated the middle class and the poor.
And our savings,
so we have that.
And our savings. Well, but before you go on, I want you to finish your thought, but I also want to pivot, because apparently tonight Kamala Harris was on Charlemagne the God's podcast, and apparently she wasn't able to move the needle. This was supposed to be a breakthrough podcast for her, and she wasn't able to move the needle with black men because, again, she was using circular logic, circular reasoning, and not answering questions. So can you address that after you finish your point?
Well, I'll address it now since we brought it up. Look, old Charlemagne is catching so much flack. And the Breakfast Club is a huge program. It's heard all over the country in urban areas.
Yeah, it's not a podcast, it's a radio show, yeah.
It's a radio show, but they also do podcasts.
Yep.
And he has caught so much flack, as has his cohorts, for not only ripping Trump, but more importantly, turning a blind eye to the absolute idiocy of this woman.
Yeah. And not to mention Biden's comment, if you don't vote for me, you ain't black.
Right. Well, that's from 4 years ago. I mean, he's still dealing with that. You're right. But my point being is, he can't just sit there. I didn't see the show. I was on the road. I was busy.
Yeah.
But I'm sure I could catch it on YouTube tomorrow. He can't just simply give her softball questions. I can already tell you what he's not going to do is he's not going to humiliate the woman. He's going to put out some stiff questions, or he did put out some stiff questions. He allowed her to do a circle jerk answer, and then he moved on to the next question.
Right, no
just
follow-ups.
like CBS and ABC News did. Okay, he's going to do what he can, but I have seen snippets of last week's and this week's show. So I guess it would have been yesterday's show and 2 shows from last week and 1 from the week before. These were snippets. I don't watch the show and I don't listen. But he is not a fan of Kamala. Let me tell you, he's not.
He's a black man. He's a black man.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
And he's a businessman.
Yeah.
He's a businessman. And so he was kind of put in a box, and I'm sure he did whatever he had to do to put her in the best light possible. She is the one, I guarantee you, when you watch the show, you're going to see she's just as much of a disaster, whether Charlemagne's asking the questions or Whoopi Goldberg, or for that matter, who is it? Brett is going to be asking questions.
Oh, that's going to be
asking
awful.
questions tomorrow.
Yeah, that's going to be awful.
So
Yeah.
the question is not. Well, I was going to say the question is not what's happening. The question should be how badly is she going to do? And when Brett asks her questions on tomorrow's show, she's going to have a Ralph Cramden moment. She's going to be doing the hummina, and it's going to be the word salad routine, and people know that. So this is why the election is looking the way it is. I'm not willing to accept the numbers. All I know is, as a Trump supporter, as a conservative with libertarian leanings, I'm very happy at how my guy is performing. And I'm even more happy at how poorly the other one is performing.
All right. Well, that's a good. Go ahead.
And that doesn't even account for Tampon Tim.
Yeah, we'll get to him in just a second. So what is your take on this Pennsylvania town hall with Kristi Noem, where he only answered a couple questions, and then apparently, now I surmise that are probably liberal plants to throw off the town hall, but apparently a couple people had medical emergencies, and like in all his rallies, Trump will stop the rally until the people are revived or taken away or treated or whatever. What's your take on this town hall that didn't really go very far? And then he played 4 or 5 songs and he was dancing around to the songs. People in the audience were a little befuddled, but.
Well, I didn't get a chance to see it. I will tell you that I find it interesting that Trump has done repeatedly. This is over and over and over again at his meet and greets. I like to call them meet and greets. When somebody is suffering from heat stroke, or they fainted for some other reason, or there's a medical emergency of some other kind, it's a significant emergency. That's what I would do. My immediate attention goes to the person who has a significant medical need. I want to make sure that person is going to be okay. I mean, I don't understand why the media is making a big deal. That's how I was raised.
Yeah.
I was raised to always be concerned about your fellow man. Being president is one thing, but you're a human being. And if you're an entertainer, to not stop the show to make sure paramedics can reach the person who is passed out and is not breathing.
Yeah.
I don't care whether you're Donald Trump or you could, as far as I'm concerned, you could be Ozzy Osbourne.
Yeah.
Stop the show.
Yeah. Well,
so the fact that they're making a big deal is just
it's quite a circus, because some news outlets, including Newsweek, didn't even say that there were medical emergencies in the crowd. They just said Trump stopped after a couple questions and asked to play music and started dancing around, and then people started leaving. They didn't even say there were medical emergencies. Several left-wing publications and news programs had the same take, and then many of the mainstream news big guns said, might have mentioned it, but questioned Trump's intellect or his sanity for asking them to play music and dancing around. Now,
remember,
they're playing on the ignorance of folks who haven't seen rallies, and they don't know that he does that. He dances around at rallies, and if there's a medical emergency at a rally, he stops the show.
I beg to differ with you. I wouldn't call it ignorance. I would simply say lack of knowledge. There's a difference.
Yeah.
And why is there a lack of knowledge? Because what does the media, all of them, throw Fox into it, throw Newsmax into it, throw One Nation News into it, throw them all into it. What does the media at large do when it comes to reporting on Trump? 94%, well, this is mainstream, 94% of all news done on Trump is negative. 94%. So out of 100 stories, 94 of them are going to be negative. So they're taking something where everybody's having a lot of fun and Trump is hamming it up, and they are turning the narrative on its ear to make it a negative story.
Yeah.
You know, we've seen this movie before. And the thing that I want to point out to your audience is Trump doesn't give a fuck.
Right.
Trump's going to be Trump. And that's what they don't get. They cannot knock him off the wall. He's not Humpty Dumpty. And this is why the story was told the way it was, Rudy. It's just to say one more negative thing about Trump.
Yeah.
And I got news for you. His second administration is going to have 94% negative news. He can, on day one, get Vladimir and the pseudo-Jew from Ukraine on the phone and say, guys, we need to have a ceasefire immediately. And I'm going to fly, let's just say, to Oslo. I'm going to fly to Oslo. You guys meet me in Oslo, face to face to face. Let's get this worked out. Enough dying, enough carnage, enough loss of treasure. Stop. We need to put this to rest. You don't think Vladimir and Vladimir is going to say yes? Of course they are. Do you really think Zelensky wants to throw any more of his people or even the foreign legions that he's hired into the meat grinder anymore? So what is the media going to do the moment he does that? They're going to come up with some kind of scenario. He's a puppet of Putin. He's selling the Ukrainians under the bus. He's throwing them under the bus. He could have a peace treaty within 4 weeks of that meeting in Oslo, and they will find a way to paint it negatively.
Sure.
Same thing can be said about Bibi, and I don't know if you heard this today, and I don't know how much of it is being done to kind of yank the dog by the tail, but supposedly, you know, Israelis have had to shoot down over 80,000 missiles in the last several months. I want to say 6 months, but I know it's several months. It could only be 3. They're running out. We got to resupply them. What is Kamala saying? Well, you know, too many Palestinian children are dying. You know, you need to bring this to the negotiating table. And so,
yeah, what does that have to do with missile defense? Doesn't have anything. Missile defense and
I'll tell you what. I'll tell you what.
Land incursion is different.
If the Israelis, well, think about it. If the Israelis can no longer successfully protect their people, and when I say them, I mean him. They can no longer protect their people from the barrage of missiles that are coming from the south, from the southeast, and from the north. And then Israelis start dying by the hundred. It's going to force Netanyahu out, and that's what they want.
Right, exactly.
Okay?
Yep.
With Trump, it'll be just the opposite.
Right.
And so, but how will they portray it? So, you know, that's why I said we've seen this movie before.
Yeah, indeed.
No matter what Trump does, okay, he could walk on water, and they would come up with some kind of scenario that, well, it's because of his policies. There's a terrible drought this year, so he was able to walk across. Okay. I'm just saying, all of these lies that have been perpetrated on not just the American people, but the world by our corporate media for the past 8 years or 12 years, but especially for the past year. They're just not washing with people anymore, Rudy.
Yeah.
People can't feed their families anymore. They can't pay their bills.
Right.
And you have a woman that's running for president saying, well, I wouldn't do anything different.
Right.
Well, what is that? I don't care what the color of your skin is. I don't care what gender you are. I don't care what party you're affiliated with. If you can't pay your bills, it doesn't matter. Everything else is ancillary. I need to be able to take care of my family.
Yeah.
And I can't.
Right. And
she's saying, I wouldn't do anything different.
Right. Well, she's going to have an opportunity economy, whatever that consists of, we don't know. Apparently, she's trying to woo the black male vote by telling them she's going to give them reparations or tens of thousands of dollars and legalize weed. Sounds like more giveaways that's going to raise inflation and make matters worse, because it doesn't matter what handouts you get. If it's worth 30% less in a year, that's not going to help you too much. Let's move on to Tim Walz. So if people didn't know, the lying, which was a great segue by you by the media about Kamala Harris, but not only about Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, but also about Tim Walz. He wasn't a head football coach. He was an assistant football coach. We've never even seen him throw a football, so we don't know if he could play a football. And he says he's a hunter and a gun owner. So he went on a hunting trip for hunting for I should say, hunting a Freudian slip, hunting for peasants, hunting for pheasants. It was a media stunt, because they were walking through a field all in their orange with their shotguns, and apparently the film crew got him a little nervous there, and it seemed like he couldn't load the Beretta shotgun he had. And apparently some of his fellow hunters had to warn him not to shoot roosters, that I guess the dogs had flushed out some roosters. They weren't pheasants. So he didn't fire the shotgun, and he certainly didn't bag any pheasants. So it seemed like a media stunt. So Tampon Tim is faring even worse than Kamala Harris. Do you have any parting words about or I should say Kamala Harris's running mate?
Yeah. Hey, Tim, it's a good thing you didn't quit your day job.
He is still governor of Minnesota, so.
That's right. Yeah. And he will remain governor until his term has been served. But there was a story, and look, you hate me for doing this to you all the time, Rudy, but I'm going to do it again anyway. There was a story that I read today. I want to say it was on X. I could be wrong. Tampon Tim has been accused within the last 10 days of being a groomer while he was a coach and a teacher.
Really?
Somebody, yeah. I meant to send that over to you, but I got distracted. You know, like you, I have to work for a living.
Unsubstantiated claims.
Right. But nevertheless, you know, I'm not going to accuse him of being something like that, but I will tell you this. When I saw him during the debate, he had the beady eye look, and the thought crossed my mind.
Yeah, he looks like a
that
creeper.
He could, yeah. I mean, I would not accuse him of that, but the thought crossed my mind.
Yeah.
And now you have somebody coming out and saying that, and in fairness to Tim, you know, he has a right to address any claim made against him. Whether or not he will have to do it, because we are talking about a friendly media, that's one thing. But the difference, again, you look at the claims that have been made, not only against Trump, the late Herman Cain, who is one of my greatest heroes, when he was running for president, I'll remind your audience, he was starting to make waves and garner support with his 999 plan. And he became a real threat because here's a black man who came out and basically scorned Obama. Well, they couldn't have that. So they gathered up a half a dozen floozies, and who gathered them up? None other than Gloria Allred,
Right.
Okay, marched them in front of a camera. Every one of them accused Herman Cain of, at the very least, fondling them, at the very worst, attacking them. And to his credit, he went right back at them and said, "You're not going to get away with this." The only reason why he ultimately stepped out of the limelight and closed out his campaign was because his wife said, "I will not deal with this.
Right.
It's not worth it. Get off the stage, Herman." And so a happily married man does what he thinks is in the best interest of his family.
Yeah.
The interesting part about that is within hours of him stepping down, all these women went right back into the cracks of society and disappeared.
Yeah. I never trust, it's not that I believe all women. I don't believe all women. And especially women that come out of the woodwork after an episode that apparently happened 10 years prior or 20 years prior, whether it's Bill Cosby or anybody else. I'm not saying they don't have validity, but I'm saying it's politically motivated if you come out 10 years after. If it was so egregious, you should have went to the police immediately. And get your just due. And then 20 years down the road, if you want to regurgitate it to ruin somebody politically because you don't think that your case was treated fairly, okay. But if you don't even make a police report and then you just come around 10 or 20 years later, I'm not saying that things didn't happen. I'm just saying that that's weak.
Hello, E. Jean Carroll.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the biggest reference. Yeah, biggest reference there is E. Jean Carroll.
Right. So my point in this, and what's the difference between these women and Paula Jones?
Right.
Let me remind you, in case you've forgotten. Paula Jones did not want to come forward.
Right.
She was forced to come forward. Okay? She knew what the Clintons were capable of doing. And the only reason why she got her day in court against Slick Willie, Broken Zipper Clinton was because of the blue dress.
Yeah. That's Monica Lewinsky.
So,
that's the blue dress.
I'm sorry. Monica Lewinsky's life was ruined too. I'm sorry. You're right. I'm confusing the two. Right. You're absolutely right. But Paula Jones
got a nose job.
Did not. Yeah. Well, that's how she paid for it.
Yeah.
He gave her $800,000 for what he and the Democrat Party and Hildebeest did to that woman's credibility as a professional. She couldn't get a job. So he had to pay her damages. But what I'm getting at is this is what Democrats do. The difference between Paula Jones and Monica Lewinsky was a willing accomplice.
Right.
Or a willing victim. But the point being is Paula Jones, being a conservative Republican, did not try to destroy Bill Clinton's campaign. She was outed and had to defend herself.
Right.
In the public domain.
Yeah.
Big difference.
Yeah. I'm not saying that people's claims don't have validity. I'm just saying it's all in the timing. It's the same thing. I put everything in context, and timing is everything. It's the same thing with COVID. It's the same thing with everything. It's like if things just come out of the woodwork just in time to save someone or to to damage somebody, I have to be suspect of whatever that is. So,
well, but
go ahead.
Rudy, I just, again, I'm sorry. I refuse to accept such a thought, and I'll tell you why. Yes, it's politically motivated, but that's not where I'm going with this. If there were truth to it, if there were a valid argument to be made, if that woman who's bringing the charges now or within the last year against, in this case, it's against Trump, okay? Let's not forget about what they did to Robert Packwood, who was a U.S. Senator from, I think it was Washington State 30 years ago, okay? If there's any truth to it, it will be brought out within days, weeks, or even months, not years, or in some cases, decades after it happened. Because the excuse every one of these fucking women have made is, I was afraid because of all the power he has. Well, you're not afraid now.
Right. He still has his power.
He still has power.
Yeah.
So that's why I refuse to accept it as truthful. I just don't believe it.
Well, right. But that leads me to back to Tim Walz. My question is, he doesn't seem like the athletic type. His history doesn't demonstrate he's the athletic type. What is he doing as an assistant coach around young men in locker rooms?
Right.
So there might be something there after all. Because
maybe, but I'm certainly not going to castigate the man. I'm just pointing out that someone came out within the last several days and said he tried to groom me. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
That's all I'm saying. I'm not accusing.
There might be something there. There certainly is a lot to ferret out with his connections to communist China, which is an ongoing.
Which I'm more concerned about.
Right. Exactly, because a guy one step away from the presidency that has a line to the communist Chinese. Last parting words before we cut out here, Perry.
Well, I'm going to say this, and many of your listeners, if not all of them, have heard it from much greater voices than I will ever have. Don't forget to vote. Vote early if you can, and make sure your neighbors, your friends, your family vote. I'm tracking several people that are very close to me in my life here in Florida, and trust me, as soon as early voting starts, and I've told you before, I've said this on your show, I have never voted anything except the day of the election. Right. This will be the first year I'm voting early because I don't know what's coming. I don't know what's coming. And the other point that people within the Republican Party and individual campaigns have made, and I never thought about this, the sooner you cast your vote, the sooner your name can be taken off the list that they have to reach out and contact. Right. So they can focus on people who may be less motivated to vote. Right. We need to have a blitzkrieg, and it starts wherever you live, whatever state you live in. Everybody has early voting at a later or earlier date. Some states already have started early voting. I don't get the early vote until the week of the 20th. So I'm going to make sure that whoever I call and I ask, have you voted yet? And if God help them, if they say no, I'm going to say, well, look, I'm coming down there. I'm picking you up and I'm taking you because I already know what your precinct is. We're going together.
Yep.
Get people to the polls. That's my final words.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Perry. Great talking to you again. My final word is going to be anybody could be an exit poller. So you want to go to your local polling place, you want to stand outside and see if people will tell you how they voted, or maybe you could count Trump shirts or red hats or whatever. If you want to gauge the turnout in your area, it's a great way to do it. Anybody could do that. Or if you want to volunteer locally to be a ballot count watcher or whatever, please do that as well. Get involved and let's make sure it's too big to rig.
That's it. Too big to rig, baby.
All right. We'll see you next week, Perry.
I'm counting on it.
All right. Great talking to you.
All right.
Bye.
Right back at you. Thanks again.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
There goes Perry. It's episode 94. Wow, we're almost at 100 since we've been doing this. 94 episodes. Wow. So we covered a lot right there. Kamala Harris is losing. There's no way she could really claw her way back. So we got to watch the cheat again to make it too big to rig. All you Republicans out there, make sure you get out and vote. Get your friends out to vote and get them out to be registered. Also, you can be a exit poller. Go to your local polling place if you are inclined. Sit out there all day and ask people how they vote, or count Trump shirts, or Republicans coming in and out, or Democrats, or whatever you like. Or volunteer to watch ballot counting and get involved. Let's make sure we beat the cheat. All right, thanks for joining me, everybody. Catch me tomorrow for my daily podcast, Rudy's Revelation, or catch me next week for episode 95 of Tuesdays with Perry. Peace out.